when it's a dip is also another thing. Like for us, like 30% is a gift. For most normal people, it's like, what the fuck? It's dead again. So I have friends who hold Bitcoin for like probably over 3, if not 4 years at this point. But based on their knowledge, I would still call them pre-coiners. They do hold Bitcoin, but they're not there yet. All of them went to AI. They all went like Nvidia is ripping, you know, and then it's the AI circle jerk where like Nvidia is paying Oracle, Oracle is paying OpenAI, and like it goes on and on and on. And what people choose to ignore, especially in the retail side of things, is it's the same thing that happened in the dot-com bubble. But I think we could even be at $1 million a coin in like 5 years or something, and people would still go like, it's a Ponzi, it's this, it's that. So I don't know. I don't think it's price driven. It's really multiplier driven and how fast we get to an X amount of price. It's always fascinating to see how people react when the price dips. You obviously see the first wave of like panic selling and like, oh shit, I should have like gotten out sooner or something. But then you really start that second wave where people just accumulate. And yeah, from that perspective, it's going great. So I hope that a lot of people use the dip nicely and were able to buy some.
Hi, Joel. How are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
Yes, everything is fine, Robin. It's been a busy day a busy start to the week, but you know, this is how I like it. I rather have a lot to do than not doing anything.
Yeah, and it's actually it's busy for a bear market almost. Like I think we are. I don't know how you look at it, but it's quite busy for a bear market now. It's debatable if it's a bear market or a bull market, but it's quite busy honestly for the lower kind of price that we are currently having. I think 7% down year to date.
It's always interesting if so we at Relai, for the listeners or the watchers who don't know, I'm the head of comms at Relai, and we really see a lot of buy or obviously sell orders flipped. So if the top is in, obviously you see a bit more sell orders. If the dips are in, you actually start seeing a lot of buy orders. And yeah, for some reason, you know, now the interest is like spiking again, and it's great to see on my end that people are getting sats. But it's always fascinating to see how people react when the price dips. You obviously see the first wave of like panic selling and like, oh shit, I should have like gotten out sooner or something. But then you really start that second wave where people just accumulate. And yeah, from that perspective, it's going great. So I hope that a lot of people use the dip nicely and were able to buy some.
Which is interesting because we always talk about retail being dumb and the retail saying like, oh, like they buy at the top and they sell at the bottom. But we know, and this is whenever I talk with someone that has data like an exchange on those topics, they all say like the price goes down, people buy more than they sell. And if the price goes down, like it's obvious. And then it's like, okay, but like, why does the price go down then? Like who's selling is always the kind of the question. Do you have any data for that?
From our end, it's always hard to say because like when do you categorize someone in Bitcoin, what they are? Like so I have friends who hold Bitcoin for like probably over 3, if not 4 years at this point. But based on their knowledge, I would still call them pre-coiners. They do hold Bitcoin, but they're not there yet. And they were amongst those that sold also in like personal conversations. And I would say it's probably very similar in most of the dips. When it's a dip is also another thing. Like for us, like 30% is a gift. For most normal people, it's like, what the fuck? It's dead again. But I would say from our end, I would definitely categorize it as like panic selling in the beginning, as I said. So probably novice people who got in a few years ago. And then you obviously see the increase in like veterans or people who have gone through a couple of dips and stuff who start accumulating. And not that I checked today, I would need to check it in the background, but I also read amongst other Bitcoin companies and on social media that a lot of business interest has also been triggered during the dips. So I don't know, maybe it's people who have had the experience and who now go, okay, now this is the dip I've been waiting for and I'll stack up. Or it's just the same playbook as always, where panic selling in the beginning and then the hardcore stackers come in.
Yeah, 100%. I almost forgot, you have been on the podcast before, but it has been so long. So I want to do it with you anyways again. Just for the few people that haven't seen the first episodes, that haven't seen you on the Relai, new show and all the other podcasts, maybe give us some background of who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Sure. So, I got into Bitcoin way too long ago, originally just to buy a plane ticket. I will not give the entire spiel. They could go and watch the first episode. And yeah, used it, bought it, converted it, and like not really thought about it. Then got back in when sending money abroad, and then used it for a while before realizing there's more to the story here. And what really got me into it is I've always been an internet kid. So, I missed the .com bubble as I was too young. I'm literally like the meme, the baby in the womb. Like I should have bought Nvidia rather than being a baby or something. But I was just interested in tech and especially, how it's shaping our society and what it's doing. And then, basically just by pure accident became, I wouldn't say a tech reporter, but, obviously reporting about it, started working in communications a lot with various media companies, originally wanted to study, to become a journalist, that scratched that because I was already working, but I was somehow intertwined between the startup world and the media world. So I learned a lot of skills from both ends. And, in the end, just started advising and writing content for companies, coming up with content strategies and doing the whole media playbook, and eventually came to Relai to do the same, which is now what I've been doing for almost 2 years at the time of recording this. When it's out, it's probably like my 2-year anniversary at Relai, where I'm in charge of the communication that goes out there, both inbound and outbound, and really trying to establish the media relationships, orange pilling journals, and obviously occasionally also getting in front of the camera to also explain the benefits of Bitcoin to people. So it's really my curiosity for tech that led me to Bitcoin, and through it figuring out how money works and why Bitcoin is the solution to this. My official start day was December 1st, and I think my first working day was like December 2nd. So it could really be that we release it on the anniversary then.
That's super interesting because I started the podcast on the 28th of November 2 years ago. So like you started it really, and I started at this channel. I started the whole thing. Really interesting. Now, when we think about Bitcoin, I think right now there's always a problem. That's why I assume probably will start the live streaming journey. But this is recorded on the 24th of November. Let's see next week when it's published where the price is. But now we see this huge price dip. We see a lot of bad sentiment, which is crazy for me. Like seeing a bad sentiment at like 80, 90K US dollar. Just a few years ago, it was bullish at lower price levels. Now we are bearish at like higher price levels. Now the 4-year cycle is interesting because if this price stays at the same level it is right now at, I think, 87, 86,000 US dollar, and it can even go a little bit higher than that. It stays the same for the next, 35 days that we have left in the year. Then we actually broke, in theory, the 4-year cycle kind of, because the 4-year cycle said like, 3 years up, 1 year down. And then there would be the year that everyone thought will be a massive up year, actually was a down year. And so we might actually witness in like 5 weeks that the 4-year cycle is kind of dead, and then we actually have like data to that. I mean, you can still argue, like it's just like an extended 4-year cycle or all different kinds of things. How do you look at the 4-year cycle and the year that we are in with so much interest, with not a lot of bad news, but still not a big price jump in Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think the AI bubble got in our way. Also, if I speak to regular friends who actively invest because they, thank God, at least understand that you need to take things into your own hand, and like you cannot basically trust the pension funds and stuff. They're empty anyway, so you need to look after yourself. All of them went to AI. They all went like Nvidia is ripping, and then it's the AI circle jerk where like Nvidia is paying Oracle is paying OpenAI, and like it goes on and on and on. And what people choose to ignore, especially in the retail side of things, is it's the same thing that happened in the .com bubble. So these companies have massive debt uploaded, and basically out of that debt, they're paying each other, but they're not making ends meet on the other end. So they're blowing everything up. But for retail users, it just seems more appealing because you have a quicker return. And I think, at least this is my theory, this is why people have not flooded towards Bitcoin like they did in the past. And Bitcoin just did its thing. I mean, look on the on-chain data, on the hash rate exploding and all of these things. Nation states getting in, tests being bought by the Czech National Bank and all of these things. So on a global scale, it would look very attractive. But I just think the AI bubble got in between. And for me personally, it's really hard to see, is it a broken 4-year cycle to the downside? So, like you said, we would not go, green, red for the first time in a while, but green, red for now. And hopefully not red afterwards again. Or is it just a regular bull market correction we saw in previous cycles and we have another upside coming our end? So I really struggle to see it that way. I was never one of the perma bulls that went at 120K US dollar per coin. We're now going to $250,000 and beyond. Just because I had enough bull markets where I was like, yeah, it's always the near the top signal where we hear these things and then it flips. Whether it be the memes with Natalie Brunell hosting a dinner or Tom Lee going on CNBC and all of these things. There are all of these cliches, that happened in the past and it seems to be happening now as well. And for now, I can really tell you, I don't know where we are with the cycle. So to me, it feels like the 4-year cycle is still somewhat intact, but maybe we just shifted it a little bit with the whole tariff stuff, with the AI stuff. And who knows, maybe what used to be end of September, early October in the previous cycle is maybe end of January now. We simply don't know and need to wait out. But it kind of feels like this, that it's just a little bit delayed and we have a different situation than what we usually have, which I think is also good to see. So the network gets more robust, people learn how to deal with it, and Bitcoin companies especially also need to figure out a way on how to then still use that momentum, whether it be positive or negative, to orange pill people.
Yeah, the $1 million God candle from Samson Mao didn't happen in 2025, I guess.
Yeah, and to me it was okay, even though Bitcoin is different, we're still in this transition area where TradFi meets Bitcoin, and Bitcoin doesn't need TradFi, it's the other way around. But you still need a lot of money for that candle to happen. So, and everyone at the same time would need to go in. So to me, that didn't make a lot of sense from the beginning, but it's always funny to see these takes. But what's cool to see, for example, is the miners getting on the AI train and Bitcoin sort of creeping its way into the mining industry this way as well. Who knows? Maybe this is for a benefit in 6 to 9 months.
Are you meaning that Bitcoin mining companies are also doing AI in their data center?
Yep. Yeah, because I think it helps us from a FUD perspective. We always heard climate killers and these kind of things, but it's literally just a data center, same as AI. And if now the miners are doing AI plus Bitcoin, I think that transition for people to understand so they use renewable energy. Oh, they're flexible on the load. Oh, they could take stranded energy and use it divergently. I think this is a good thing to see. So, who knows? Maybe this dip is also just panic driven and we just need that once in a while to shock the system and then to see where the new innovation is going. And be rewarded with that afterwards.
Yeah, I also heard that take that I forgot by whom, but he just said we need just a 10, 20, 30% dip to get out the leverage traders to have an organic nice bull run up, because those leverage guys always mess it up for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I read a fascinating tweet by Jesus, I forget the guy, the on-chain analytics guy, Jan van something. I think he works at Cointelegraph or a CoinDesk, I'm not sure. British guy. And he also said, maybe the leverage takeout, which you see with treasury companies, leverage traders, is actually a good thing. It seems like we never learn in every bull run. There's always leverage involved, but, the Bitcoin network humbles these guys. So if that's what it takes for us to go further, I think everyone is willing to take on that bet and to see what plays out in a couple of months.
I'm also really bullish on on Bitcoin mining companies going into energy production, because this would be huge if the energy producers would directly also mine Bitcoin. And I actually have to take where an energy company that doesn't mine Bitcoin will at some point have to either mine Bitcoin or just like go out of business, because the energy producers that do mine Bitcoin, or the Bitcoin miners that do the energy producing, have such a huge advantage of not wasting energy, of all the flexible load, all the things that we already know from Bitcoin mining, that those companies will dominate so much that they will drive out the business out of energy producers that just do energy producing. And I like Bitcoin mining is one of the most overlooked things to talk about in Bitcoin. It's like, yeah, they're doing their work. Hash rate goes up forever. Like there's doesn't seem to be a dip in the hash rate, like in the price there. And, we kind of don't talk about it, but it's so exciting when you think about the infrastructure and the massive scale of that whole industry and how they infiltrate the whole energy sector.
Definitely. And, I can't remember if this was spring this year or spring last year. I also remember the headlines back then by the second biggest energy operator in Japan realizing we have too much solar energy. So they created like a subsidiary and then went into Bitcoin mining. Unfortunately, it's been quite quiet around this, so there hasn't been developments. But I think also like we will see more development in that regard. It will just probably take longer because there's a lot of implementation to be figured out. You need to connect to the grid and these kind of things. And you probably need a lot of pilots to run to test if the theory works out. But yeah, if we see this and you potentially also see like home solutions like 21 Energy or Riot, who are really also then utilizing this. At one point you have like mining all around you, and this is surely where people will go like, oh, if I can already use it to heat my home or my, I don't know, plant a green farmhouse, I might as well hold the coins. So I think more use cases like this will definitely show what's being done. And yeah, I'm eager to see how fast they develop.
Yeah, 100%. I'm really interested because you said it in video before, and I have now people reaching out, oh, like, why don't you cover or like invest in Nvidia? And I'm like, this is already now the biggest company on earth. Mm-hmm. Yes, it will grow from here compared to the US dollar or euro as everything. But how much can it really grow in purchasing power? Like, what is the full potential of Nvidia? It's already the biggest company in the market cap. Where else can it go? Of course, it can grow a little bit here and there. It gets productive and all of those things, especially if you measure it in US dollar. And it's always interesting how at the peak of it, everyone is interested. And I wonder often, because I think we never really seen that. Maybe 2017 was kind of a thing where we saw that in Bitcoin. I wonder what kind of price or what kind of milestone we have to hit in Bitcoin to have a similar experience that what Nvidia kind of has, where everyone is talking about it. Everyone's like, oh yeah, invest in Nvidia. It's a great company. Like, who would have thought, like, this is an amazing story. I feel like 2017 was a little bit like that, where you couldn't go over the street without overhearing someone talking about Bitcoin, which, by the way, I think the Bitcoin price was there like 17,000 or something like that. So like a lot shorter than right now. Do you think there is a price, there's a milestone in Bitcoin, there's something, even in users on the network, like whatever it is, that Bitcoin needs to hit to have a celebration moment than kind of Nvidia has, where everyone is kind of praising Nvidia?
I don't think it has a price, for the simple reason, if that were the case, we would have already seen it at 100K. I really thought that would be the moment where they go like, oh, 6 figures per coin. It actually did the opposite. I read a lot of feedback that they said like, oh, it's too expensive and all of these things now. So they still didn't get, you don't need to buy a whole coin. I think it's a multiplier question. So you mentioned 2017. I think the main reason so many people spoke about it is you could go to sleep at $1,000 per coin, wake up the next morning, it would be 10 grand. So that multiplier was 10x in like span of a couple of hours. And this just kept like snowballing. And, also like, the amount of people who got into it expanded quickly. We haven't really seen this yet, and Nvidia obviously has. So if you take Nvidia on like 1 year scale, people know that it did like close to 1,000% and all of these things. And then you break it down by day and you go like, oh shit, that's almost like 2x a day or 3x a day. So I think it doesn't really matter which price this would be per coin in Bitcoin. It just needs to be that multiplier. And yeah, then it just needs stuff like, okay, well, you could even say like even the Americans who like they haven't had the strategic reserves, and like I personally think it was just a voter BS. We'll need to see and wait how this develops, but maybe it really is like some controversial figure changing its tune on Bitcoin. Looking at you, Miss Lagarde, or any other big nation or something getting in, where it's finally for people like, aha, it is to be taken serious. But I think we could even be at $1 million a coin in like 5 years or something, and people would still go like, it's a Ponzi, it's this, it's that. So I don't know. I don't think it's price driven. It's really multiplier driven, and how fast we get to an X amount of price that people would probably talk about it. Or obviously like the fiat system just collapses overnight and people flee into like hard assets, which would arguably be like still gold and Bitcoin. For them to go like, oh shit. So it is definitely, this thing where I need to take a lot of, time to understand it and consider why I missed out on it in the previous years.
Yeah, this kind of the big print, coming, but I 100% agree with you. I think at $1 million, most people will still don't get it. Like it will be more people, obviously, but like most people will still be like, I don't know. I don't care about it. But there's because you brought up the strategic reserve, I think the more interesting thing is even the Czech National Bank. I found it interesting that there's the first time a national bank, I think it's the first time that a national bank for the first time bought Bitcoin, even though it's just an experiment. Also, there's crypto involved and all those like small things to consider in there. But they did it. And it almost got new coverage. Like it was like a small blip on my timeline. It was like for half a day, like, oh yeah, Czech National Bank does $1 million. There's a national bank that buys Bitcoin. I'm like, that should have been for some reason bigger news. Like they have talked about it before and now they execute it. I think, no speculation here, but like, I think it's just like a matter of time till they actually do have a plan on accumulating, because like, why would they just try with $1 million and say like, oh, it did not work. Like what should not work? Like what is the experiment? What do they want to try out? And so I'm really curious on the national side of things, because as you said, institutions or like companies' interest, we know is growing, is really strong. It's almost for me now, it's very clear that this will just go on. Like more companies will buy Bitcoin. Companies will just buy more of Bitcoin. And then like what happens with the governments? What happens with the central banks? What happens with Lagarde? What happens with the Federal Reserve? Are they seeing kind of Bitcoin at some point as the new kind of gold, the digital oil, however you want to frame it? The Czech National Bank was for me like one big, there is a central bank that actually might see it and they actually might go ahead on it. What's your kind of take on like that kind of adoption of national banks and governments?
Yeah, I think the national bank thing was probably big in our circles, but just not attractive enough for financial legacy media. To be fair, they also bought some other stuff. They didn't disclose what. They also disclosed what did they say? Like we're utilizing the technology to see what we can do and some stablecoin stuff. But yeah, I guess we'll need to wait and see what they do. I still think that they will eventually pull the plug, because not only do they have to look at it from a reserve standpoint, but the Czech Republic is actually also quite a big Bitcoin hub with developers, with companies. So if they're smart, they could look at this and go like, we already have an industry there with experts. We can speak to them, which I'm again fully speculating. Was at the Treasury launch event, asked 1 million times if they're helping with them, and I never got a clear answer. So that's maybe already happening. And yeah, that's sort of the first domino that falls. You also have the sovereign wealth fund in Luxembourg, which is more an ETF play because they actually bought ETF shares and not proper Bitcoin, but you know, could evolve. I asked the finance minister in Amsterdam at the conference. I flat out lied. He didn't want to speak to me first. I was like, I actually live in Luxembourg and like, I have a few questions. And then he went like, a citizen. And, he gave me a very vague answer. And then at the end I had to say like, yeah, by the way, I lied. I don't live in Luxembourg. I just wanted to speak to you. He wasn't happy about that. But, you sort of see like they changed their minds. Like okay, it's not a speculation tool, it's more of like a hedging tool maybe we can use. Maybe the Czech National Bank is a little bit further than this. And I just think it takes time for them to realize it. And what I'm then really interested in is if they buy, do they buy from like freshly printed money and they just do the auto convert button swap? Or do they actually like sell gold, sell other assets and then use this to buy Bitcoin? I think this could also be an interesting aspect then. And yeah, if one bank does it, who's courageous like the Czechs, maybe others will follow. Because for American listeners in Europe, you are really fighting against the ECB, who has a firm stance on like, you're not allowed to buy Bitcoin. And the Czech National Bank just showed the middle finger and basically said, F you, we might as well do. So I think this just drags on a little bit. And it just needs like one successful story with a bigger national bank. And if that happens, others will follow pursuit and will just gradually move into this. And then maybe like a big nation follows and, suddenly everyone wants Bitcoin. So it's really a wait and see and a wait and hope that they understand Bitcoin properly and not just like a number on the screen.
Yeah, it's super interesting when we think about the big print that is kind of coming. I think you also mentioned before we started recording, you also have the book from Larry behind you. And it's so obvious, hopefully in hindsight, it will be so obvious to see central banks kind of moving into Bitcoin because they see, oh yeah, the big print is actually happening. Like people are just like printing more money and it gets devalued over time and we cannot hit our inflation goals of like 2-3% and the inflation is like way higher and they have to hedge themselves. I mean, I said that in Amsterdam actually on stage. For anyone to stay relevant, they have to adopt Bitcoin. So on an individual level, if you want to stay relevant financially, if you want to stay relevant on a company basis as Strategy did, recently Saylor talked on that on Jordan Peterson, where he felt he's stagnating with MicroStrategy and then he found Bitcoin and he found a way to actually grow again. And so if central banks want to stay relevant and they want to do something, I think Bitcoin is the only real way to actually do that and progress forward. So I'm really looking forward to that. And the big print, I think Larry was already 2 times, or maybe 2 times on the show, and we talked about it. But what's kind of your like take on the big print and what's there to expect from devaluation of our currencies?
Yeah, so I'm actually the big print is one of the books where I'm rereading it again, just because it was so good. And Larry is just a good author. He explains it quite nicely and a funny dude as well. So if you ever see Larry at a conference, don't be shy, go up to him. He really has this, Larry, if you see this, don't get offended, like these grandpa vibes. He really looks after you and he explains everything to you and he draws his conclusions based on his experience. And it really demonstrates that basically everything is going to zero but Bitcoin. And at one point, these banks will have to ask themselves, or the whole system, are we continuing pricing everything in failing currency or failing currencies if you take the global scale, or are we going into Bitcoin? And not that that happens overnight, pricing everything in it, but it could become at least intra-banking unit between central banks that then gradually it evolves. My biggest takeaway from the big print was really, he highlights this so often that essentially the yearly inflation of any currency, he takes the US dollar as a US citizen as the prime example, is 70%. So roughly 6% inflation every month, because that's the inflation rate and the growing rate by the M2 money supply. And knowing all of this and obviously seeing it in everyday life, if people go shopping, if you see like my rent, for example, also increased by 5% just recently, you do go like, oh yeah, it is actually 70% a year. So your money gets bigger by that amount. And, if you take this on a long enough time frame, the rate in which it devalues is so fast that there is no other way out for them than a hard stop where they go like, okay, Weimar Republic and then the Deutsche Mark, your money just is like devalued by 98% and we'll start from scratch and we build it solidly now. Or we just continue printing money and we hope no one notices. Sort of rereading this and going through it again was like, yeah, he's right. And it just strengthens your conviction in actually going after Bitcoin. Because for all of us who are deep far this rabbit hole, it's not about the making money anymore. It's not about, the number on the screen. Obviously, you need this to orange pill people to say what the price is today and how many sats you can get. But it's really about, I want to safeguard my future, and Bitcoin, with all of its ups and downs, gives me this possibility. And yeah, this is sort of really the feeling you have reading the big print. So I can highly recommend it for everyone. Also, if Larry is selling some at a conference, go up, say hi. He will signature it with the block time at the moment when he did it. He writes a funny quote in there. Get on with, figuring out how these things work, because understanding the Bitcoin network and understanding the tech behind it is one thing. You obviously continue learning, but understanding how flawed the current system is and realizing what the alternative is, I think, so much more a conviction grabber for you to then go into Bitcoin and realize why you need hard money.
One important aspect of the big print is, for me, always the preparation of the individual, and self-custody, I think, could be a very major role, because if there's really a major big print coming, we don't know what systems will survive, what system kind of hold in that situation, how bad it really be. What kind of role do you think self-custody plays in a situation where a big print is actually coming?
It's hard to say, because I think obviously you should hold your coins in self-custody, but I don't think that everyone is capable to do it from an understandable standpoint, from a knowledge standpoint, and generally also from a fear standpoint. A lot of people just fear taking ownership over their life. So it'll always be, in my opinion, a minority that does it. But obviously you have all of the benefits. So you control what you do with it. Unless someone forces you to hand over the keys stuff, you're not able to have your entire wealth being thrown out of the window and someone grabbing onto it. But I think it will take a similar discretion as you've seen with gold, where there will be the portion of people who hold it in self-custody and who go, this is how I live my life. Then there will be potentially a split between people who go like, I hold a certain percentage in self-custody and a certain percentage on like a Bitcoin bank or something. And there will probably still be people who will rely on third parties, as we see now. I just hope, and I really know this sounds bad, that enough of stuff happens where people go, ooh, I shouldn't trust a third party. I should be in control. And unless that happens, I think we will need to live with a future where I'm saying maybe 75% ish people will rely on a third party and outsource their custody. And as Hal Finney said, maybe you can build Bitcoin banks. Maybe there's also technological aspects to hook up to a Bitcoin bank in a self-custody wallet, but still remain ownership. For this, we need to wait and see. But the greatest benefit is obviously you can do whatever you want with your Bitcoin. And if you give this away, you just have to live with the consequences, I think. And for most people, this is practical enough that they do. But I'm happy to be wrong about this in the coming years and see full prosperity in the self-custody department.
I also have a hard time believing it. That's why I find it very impressive also that you guys are self-custody and say like, hey, we want them to take control of their own keys. As I understand it correctly, Relai is still like full self-custody, and you never take any keys or any Bitcoin from people that use the app, which is, I can imagine, sometimes even hard to do, because people saying like, hey, what are those 12 words? And why am I wrecked just because I lose my 12 words? Because it's an app and people are used to like having a username, password, email address, and just recovering all of that. So I can imagine sometimes a little problems, even like with customer support, with people that maybe don't want the self-custody even.
Totally, or they don't understand what the 12 words are, even though we have countless trigger warnings and explanations in the app. They go like, oh, I thought this was like my two-factor authentication download code, or, how many people do two-factor authentication then keep this code? Probably no one. Or stuff like, oh, I thought this was like a secondary password, and I thought if I forget it, you can still reset it. So there is still a lot to be done on that front. And I also know that there's a lot of encrypted backup functionalities that work on these things, whether it be a local file which you can then upload and restore your wallet, maybe even a more simplified process rather than 12 words, acronyms or these kind of things. And this is just the downsides, I think, to having young tech, because in the broad scale of things, Bitcoin is still very young and we need to see how this evolves. But I would say, for most people who have no idea what self-custody is and they're confronted within our app with the whole aspect of it, they simply don't understand that it's actually a very essential part to us and to your wallet. But again, that it's down to us to actually educate them better and really showcase what this is all about. So for the next 10 years, I'm getting more bullish with bad things that happen. So people turn towards self-custody, but at the same time, I'm very bearish to see if people understand this fast enough. So we kind of need to wait and see how this plays out.
I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today, and you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I finally and officially mine Bitcoin. This is not just something to stack more Satoshis, but it's most importantly also to support the network. Individual miners are the ones that keep the Bitcoin network decentralized. And by the way, you get KYC free Bitcoin. That's why I use simplemining. I get an actual proper Bitcoin miner. They set it up for me. They repair it if it breaks down. And most importantly, they let me choose the pool and even connect my own full node. I'm completely sovereign and I'm completely in control, and I can sign up with Ocean, no account needed. I just give them a Bitcoin address and then there's mining going on. No KYC, nothing. So if you're ready to mine Bitcoin, go to simplemining.io, tell them you come from Robin, and let's mine Bitcoin together. I'm always afraid that people, whenever something bad happens like FTX, people just say like, oh, it's Bitcoin's fault. And they don't learn the real lesson that was in there. Like, don't keep your money with an company that is like has a weird leader and has some how is it called, an off-shelf company or something like that, because it was not US based. But in general, the lesson should be just keep your own Bitcoin. We have the possibilities to actually take custody of your own Bitcoin and do not rely on a third party. And this is so genius, but it needs a lot of time. Like people don't get it from the first day. It needs a lot of time for people to really understand what this technology is, what it can bring, and what it actually can enable for you personally to do and to prepare yourself. Because we always play the game, what bank can I trust? Like where is it most secure from an IT security standpoint so I don't get hacked? Because we see it every day, bank accounts get hacked, everything gets hacked. And so the cold wallet, self-custody, it's just my keys and it's distributed and all of those things. It's the only way that you can really ensure, even if the institutions crash down, even if I get hacked, even if there is something happening, I'm still fine. Or at least I'm responsible. So
Yes,
at least it was my fault and not the fault of someone else that I have to blame now.
I have such a good example for this. A friend of mine, I got him fully on board during the bear market with self-custody Bitcoin, explained the situations. He understood everything completely because he got wiped out with Celsius. So I'm like, you're an idiot. And just recently he went like, oh, I actually told another friend of mine the seed phrase. So if like I get hit by a bus, that he knows where it is. I'm like, okay, first of all, you could do this via notary or via lawyer or via will or whatever you want to keep behind to tell people, hey, in case I die, this is where a majority of the wealth is. And if you want access to it, this is how it works. But like, even though you do everything right in self-custody, he also had it backed up properly, not just on a piece of paper, all of these things. He still trusted a third party, in this case, another friend, with that seed phrase. Now, this friend is not a bad guy, I hope, but he still gave up all of the prosperity and all of the advantages of self-custody to someone else. So I think even though you do self-custody, you still need to be so careful to not make any mistakes like this. And yeah, I mean, I'm basically waiting for him to tell me that the other guy robbed him and he ran away, where I could again tell him that he's an idiot, because you need to like touch the hot stove to probably realize what you need to do. But there is so little nuances there, which it's just for me hard to see a future where everyone gets this quickly and then moves on. So it will go in these graduate levels. And as I said, it unfortunately takes a lot of bad events for people to understand it.
Yeah. And even if the friend is a great guy and not a bad actor, he increases his attack surface because the friend, how does he store the seed phrase? Maybe he is not careful enough because it's not his money. And so there's a lot wrong with that story.
Yes. And just so, I don't know. It's just out of a force of habit. Like, I would argue every Bitcoiner in his close family, obviously, if you have kids, if you have a partner, you do educate them about Bitcoin as well. Especially the more significant it becomes a portion of your entire wealth. But even there, I think you do that in steps. You don't tell them where everything is. You don't hold everything in one place. You're really smart about your security setup. And this is this habit thing I was talking about earlier, where for people, it's just more easier to go to a bank. It's easier to, make an account on FTX and like keep it there because, they look serious. They sponsor sports stadiums, these kind of things. And as a society, I think we're just not there where everyone is self-sufficient and thinking of doing everything themselves. So yeah, if that takes a lot of that time, it's not looking quite bright, but I'm happy to be proven wrong if this means that we have more coins in self-custody.
And the big print is coming, so the honeypot gets bigger for someone to steal Bitcoin. This is also something that I think not a lot of people think about. If they buy Bitcoin now, they don't take care of it, and they have that Bitcoin now somewhere, and then the honeypot gets 10x bigger and 100x bigger. All of a sudden, the honeypot for attackers to attack those Bitcoin gets a lot bigger. So actually, in the context of the big print, it's super important to take self-custody serious, not just take self-custody, but like take actual good self-custody, because as Larry said, the big print is coming and it will make your Bitcoin worth more. And so you have to take care of them even better. That's why I always say, if you take self-custody, imagine those Bitcoin are worth 10x what they are currently worth. Are you still comfortable with holding it in the current setup? A lot of people say like, probably have to invest a little bit more money there or like a little bit more time or effort or education or whatever.
Totally. And I mean, this doesn't even go into the whole, doomsday scenario with like, what as if quantum computing suddenly becomes super powerful? What if this happens and that happens? So you have to think about so many steps in between, where sometimes I go, okay, rather than keeping it on like a fully air gapped hardware wallet and never connected to the internet, might as well just remember the brain wallet and that's it. And keeping it there and just, destroying the evidence every time you receive or send Bitcoin. Yeah, there's so much stuff to go there. But again, like also, this is a young space, so the custody space also evolves. And if people do feel uncomfortable and they maybe want some help, they can use multi-sig solutions. They can use institutional solutions like on-ramp, which secure it via what do they call it? Multi-institutional custody or something. So I think there's stuff like this there. I would just go trust yourself first and learn how to deal with this, because if the big print is here, I think you'll be happily sitting there and thinking what a great choice you made in the past, because you can again control whatever you want to do with your Bitcoin, and that's, I think, the best feeling you can have.
I just remember, because we're talking about the big print, my favorite Larry story, and he's really a great guy. And I was sitting with him in Prague, and we were about to go to dinner actually on his birthday, or like one day after his birthday. And he, by the way, like really great that he still comes to Bitcoin Prague on his birthday and delivers like, I think 3 times. He was on stage and like delivered a great thing. But I was sitting there with him and we were talking, and he out of the blue was like, "Hey Robin, do you have a girlfriend?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Is she the one?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Why aren't you married? Like, what's going on?" And he's so direct, so nice, so fun. So, almost seems like a Larry, advertisement, but like, he is a great guy. And, he's like one of the few Bitcoiners, that reached a high level, are super humble and have a great way of communicating and bringing a message across. And actually, before the big print, I kind of gave up on Bitcoin books. I was like, there are great Bitcoin books out there. What else should there be? And the big print was for me the one book that was like, oh, there's still like that. There's a big book coming out that's actually really good and adds value to the space, not just like reiterating the same thing in a little bit of a different way. So I'm glad you brought it up, because the big print and Larry are both great things. So people really should check it out. I have to get him a 3rd time on the podcast, I think, now.
Definitely. I don't know if he's in Abu Dhabi. Maybe you could even do like a live thing with him. And I also like that Larry, because he is one of these gold bucks, he's also not afraid to speak out within the community. And I'll use him as an example now. I think we will also see this more going forward, that we will have very prominent Bitcoin voices who also say like, hey, I'm under the impression gold also has its utility because of X, Y, and Z. Stop calling it a shiny rock. You'll see a lot of GFYs there in his replies and stuff. And I think we kind of need that debate culture within Bitcoin as well, because I don't know how you feel, Robin. There are various Bitcoiners I know, great people. I don't agree with everything they say, but I respect what they say because I know they understood Bitcoin. And maybe this is also needed to, for example, further push self-custody or further push the knowledge within national banks, like all the topics we talked about before. And you do start seeing this. So, this is also great to see, comparing the last couple of bull runs to whatever weird bull market this one now is.
I think I have a theory, and I'm curious actually what you think about that. Because Bitcoiners are so used to fighting against systems and fighting against the banks, fighting against big outside forces, that we got to be really aggressive actually. And so our debate culture, when you see it, is really not always, sometimes like nuanced and great, but like a lot of the time it's very aggressive. So if you don't agree with me, you're just stupid, and like you're like you get called out very quickly, and sometimes even without reason. So it's I think we've seen the peak of that with the Knots versus Core debate, with the op return debate. This was kind of where I'm seeing like, hey, they made it way bigger than it is, first of all, and then both camps like really attack each other, not like really the core topic here. And they throw things at each other where I'm like, that does not make sense. Like, I don't want to be in either side at that point. It's like both, I don't agree with both arguments at that point. And so it is almost interesting to see where because we have been attacked so massively, that the culture of Bitcoin to survive in this crazy attacks that we have lived through from big forces outside, block size wars, China, so many other aspects. Even Elon Musk, you can make an argument where he got in and then 2 weeks later shitted on the environmental aspect of it. We got through so many attacks that now our debate culture is very aggressive because we still have it in our survival instinct as a Bitcoin community. I don't know how you see it. You are really connected with the community, probably a lot better and deeper than I am. But this is kind of my thing where I'm like, wow, people sometimes are really aggressive on things like what to eat, things like that.
Yeah, I think, to an extent, also a lot of times, things get quoted and written into law. So, one example is, Bitcoin is for libertarians. Yes, there is a lot of libertarian aspects to, if you read the white paper and the way Bitcoin is conceptualized, but by saying just one thing, and I'm flat out also stating here, I myself would identify myself as a full-on libertarian. But I still accept that they are maybe very left-leaning Bitcoiners who see utility in Bitcoin from one end, or very right-leaning Bitcoiners, or whatever it is in the middle, also politicians and stuff, suits from Wall Street. Everyone has a connection point, and I think it's healthy to just debate, understand what their point is. You could still think to yourself like, yeah, you're a fucking moron for saying this, but you shouldn't be aggressive, as you said. And I think a lot of it comes from being pressured down always. I think Bitcoin in its natural state also attracts a lot of people who think on the outside of the box, if you think about the whole cypherpunk movement as well, where it came about, it's not a mainstream culture movement where you come into and you had to just push back constantly. So we kind of lose scope of this often. But then again, I have to say it's then good that we have like the Wall Street suits with their own version of Bitcoin with the ETFs on board. It's good that we have these weird debates surrounding knots and core. And it's also good that we have the haters of Bitcoin who continuously bash down, because the more people see these discussions, and sometimes it doesn't take a lot. It takes like one bad comment by like a big climate activist and a lot of Bitcoiners in the reply who goes like, Bitcoin fixes this because of this and that, where then normies go, interesting, like wouldn't be my cup of tea the way these guys talk. But maybe there's more to this story. And I think the more we soften this blow, the better it gets. But again, it's not an issue we fix overnight. The whole debate culture also outside of Bitcoin, there's always a confrontational aspect to it. There's always a neutral aspect to it. And we just kind of have to figure out a way on how to deal with this. But I would agree with your statement. Like, let's have a little bit more of a neutral position, agree to disagree on a lot of things, and like, don't get too personal immediately, because this is actually how you then can also start communicate with people, and you also become open to hearing other voices and thinking about different aspects, where Bitcoin is maybe not a fix yet, but could be somehow.
I heard this tweet in the morning. I couldn't find it right now, but it was kind of like that. Dear Bitcoin Maxis, the way we look at shitcoiners is the same way as TradFi people looks at us Bitcoin Maxis. Because like very aggressive, like their argument sometimes doesn't make sense because they don't have the context of that. And I was like, that's kind of interesting, because if you are really deep into TradFi and you see a Bitcoin Maxi, you probably think, he's an idiot. like very clearly, because you have to unlearn so much and you have to learn the context, and just like putting out like statements like, oh, fix the money, fix the world. Like, oh yeah, like, what? Like that does not make sense. So I found it really interesting. Dear Bitcoin Max is the way we look at shitcoiners. It's the way how TradFi looks at us, or something like that. Was really interesting to see.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on that note also, again, I used to be one of these maxis who would like argue like, oh, why aren't you like starving to death and buying as much Bitcoin as you want, or as you need? I think it's also healthy within Bitcoin. Everyone uses Bitcoin for a specific reason. If you're a parent and you want to safeguard the future of your kids, that might be the reason. If you're 25 and you got in like 10 years ago because you were a smart teenage kid, you may have other reasons to have Bitcoin and how to use these Bitcoins differently. So I think also the stereotype of like what would it be? Carnivore eating, barefoot, no aftershave or shaving cream, Bitcoiner, might fit for a lot of people, but people have different reasons for getting into Bitcoin. And they just need to deal with this. And that's the reason, people get into it, and we should let them live. So like the whole like live and let live thing, plus, don't try to force anything down people's throat, I think is the best thing to go deal with this.
I now found it. It was from Luke. I was just recently with him in Amsterdam on his podcast and on stage. He's a fun guy, and I think himself, I don't know if he defines himself as a Bitcoin maxi, but I would say he's a Bitcoin maxi. He wrote, "Dear Bitcoin maxis, remember that how XRP, so like Ripple and Zcash shills sounds to you is literally how you sound to the rest of the world." And I loved it in the morning because I was like, yeah. But I'm right. Like there's this weird thing. So I think it's just like self-awareness that we as Bitcoin maxis sometimes sound really extreme to the rest of the world. And maybe if we talk to the rest of the world and not to ourselves, keep that in mind if you're trying to orange pill someone, because you can sound quite out of control and extreme to the rest of the world.
Definitely. And again, like, everyone needs its time. Everyone needs its path to find ways into this whole thing. And everyone has different time horizons. A 6-year-old Bitcoiner looks at Bitcoin differently than a 20-year-old. And this is a good thing because this again proves that Bitcoin has many utilities and many use cases. And from that regard, you can also come up with different narratives, different ways to orange pill. So I see it as a net benefit. That we have these confrontational debates, and that more and more people are going like, okay, I will add my own 2 cents to this, or I will figure out a way how to deal with this. And this is just part of an ever-growing adoption and an ever-growing community, which if you think about it, 10 years ago in Bitcoin, having these debates online and like media outlets picking up X posts or tweets back then as sources would never happen. And we got this far with this crazy style of debating, and who knows how it may evolve. We maybe even go a little bit further.
How do you actually look at stablecoins? Because Ripple was mentioning it as Tether. I think we saw each other, in Lugano recently with the Tether thing. How do you actually look at stablecoins and the impact they have on Bitcoin?
Impact-wise, I think it's a necessary evil for people to go from fiat to Bitcoin. Because purely if you look at it, you have some stable coins, you want to swap them to Bitcoins, probably easier than a bank transfer and processing and buying. I know they solve like a real world problem in the global south, and especially countries or communities who don't have access to physical fiat dollars, they can gain access this way. And yeah, it's an interesting play for treasuries worldwide. Because they can have someone that buys their worthless junk and, who keeps the system going. So on one end, I'm like, necessary evil. It works. It definitely has its utility. But on the other end, if we get people fast enough away from stablecoins to Bitcoin and show that, it is actually superior money, and you need to have a mindset shift there. I think the better it will be, because I don't really want to use everything that keeps the treasury alive. I think the treasury had its time and it needs to evolve. And now we need something better, which is Bitcoin. So yeah, I would just go with like, it's a necessary evil. It somehow drags out the fiat landscape a little bit longer. Has some utility, but I'm hoping people get on the Bitcoin train faster.
What do you mean with treasury? Like the government treasury, the central banks?
Yeah, so if you think about it, let's take the Genius Act, for example. Again, this is me now speculating, but it basically says this in the Genius Act. If you require stablecoin holders to buy a certain amount of T-bills, of bonds, and the amount in market cap increases in stablecoins, you could make the case that you say, okay, Treasury, like the US Treasury, for example, is really liking stablecoins because they finally found the buyer who is willing to buy these bonds because they had issues before, and who's taking that debt off them and in return issues something that works, right? This is also why stablecoins are used more in like the global south. The technology itself does solve a use case. And they could just live on happily and continuously print because they will have someone to buy that. Very speculative from my end, but I think if you look at this from an outsider's perspective, it really makes sense then for them to also push stablecoin adoption and obviously also solve the whole intra-banking issue, because sending some stable sats around or just some USDT or USDC is much more efficient than wiring like $1 billion and, you know, having the whole complicated system in the background. So I think, again, it is a necessary evil that helps them short term, but I'm convinced that long term it leads people to also look at Bitcoin. So if that again is something we have to do to get people into Bitcoin, happy to do so. But I would be glad if people through stablecoins find their way much, much faster into sats rather than doing this whole, like, I will use fiat on a blockchain and it's cool playbook.
It's interesting for me when we look at stablecoins in the US and how normal and how pushed they are. And then I look at the EU and the central banks, what they're doing here. They are really steamrolling ahead, kind of steamrolling ahead in their own speed with CBDCs and with the digital euro. And we always talk very badly about the digital euro, about CBDCs, like it's very harsh against them, rightly so. But then I see how nice Bitcoiners and how nice we as a community sometimes are to stablecoins. And I'm like, of course there's a difference, but like, what is the real difference? It's in the end of the day, there's still like a central bank behind them. Yes, there's like private. So it's not, the central bank itself. So there are some like systematic differences. Like if the digital euro comes out, it's directly the ECB controlling it. And with, Tether, there's like at least like one layer of company in between. So it's not directly the Fed saying what is worth and all of the programmability things. But it's basically the same thing for me from a systematic change. There's like differences there, but I don't see stablecoins and CBDCs as a huge different thing. It's for me kind of the same category if we look at it like what it really is. And I'm curious how you think about that, because in the States they're so hard against stablecoin, so hard against CBDCs, but so friendly to stablecoins. And I'm like, is there that much difference that that they are against the other one, but very for the other one? So I don't know how you look at that.
Yeah, I think so. I do agree with you. There is a key difference, obviously, between a surveillance coin, which is what a CBDC will be, and a privately issued stable coin, which just mirrors the financial world we currently live in. But yeah, this is also one of my thinking sometimes, because me personally, having spoken to Paolo, for example, a couple of times at Tether, not a bad guy, full on cypherpunk through and through, likes Bitcoin, understands that it's a business model he has set up and he's in charge here. He would not be willing to, you know, surveil people or these kind of things. At least I hope. But they also become an attack vector. Like, what if the next administration in the States, and I have a very sneaky suspicion that it will be the blue team that is going to win in the upcoming elections, just because this is how US politics flips back and forth. They're not as crypto friendly as the red team now, for example. Okay, the red team is also using insider dump to make money, but that's a different topic. That's the shitcoin aspect of the current administration. What if they then change their tone? What if they possess these companies? Because as you mentioned, yes, they're private, but government could come in and like basically hold a gun to their head and say like, you're now our bitch. What if these things happen? They wouldn't be far off to use that tech as well. And you could also make the argument that CBDCs could also be born out of Bitcoin, because with Bitcoin, it showed the central banks, we don't need you. So they built their own Bitcoin. It's just much, much worse way, not with the incentive of saving for the future, but controlling you. So these stable coins discussions, I think at one point could be that they overtake them and turn it into a CBDC. When that is the case, I don't know. The only optimism I have in Europe is the ECB is so bad at implementing anything, and they actually have a lot of pushbacks by banks who want to have their own stable coins and not use the CBDCs, that I kind of hope we can drag time out and for them to die out, and then, no one is going to use it. But I think it needs to be something in the back of people's minds that this could be a danger. And even though the stablecoin issues don't mean anything bad, if they have a gun to their head, none of them say like, shoot me. They want to survive as well. So the only option, in my opinion, out of this is holding Bitcoin in self-custody with all the dangers, because there's not really another alternative out there for you to say, I can move around freely and do whatever I want.
Which is really interesting. I just want to, because we're already over our time, do you still have like 5-10 minutes?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, then I wanted to get into a few more topics, but I will jump over the few not that interesting ones like Zcash. I was like, let's not even talk about that. The strategy one is interesting for me. Not only strategy itself, but like the treasury companies. How do you look at them, especially because there are just to explain first, there are for me 3 different kind of treasury companies. There are the companies that just have a profitable business and they put from the profitable business cash flow into Bitcoin. Like as I mean, I guess even me as my small podcasting business does. Then there are treasury companies that are pure plays. So they only buy Bitcoin. They don't really have any profitable business. They just want to raise money and buy as many Bitcoin as possible. I guess 21 Capital is one famous example. Then there is like a in-between thing where it's like MetaPlanet, where they have a business model, but it's rather small. I think they have 2 hotels or 3 hotels. Like they are not that huge as a business model compared to with the market cap and all of those things. And then outside of that, for me, strategy like MSTR, like this is like a whole different beast. How do you look at the space of treasury companies and the how do people call it, the suit coin summer that we have lived through?
Yeah, I think like anything that happens in Bitcoin or just generally in markets and stuff, you have shiny object syndrome with some stuff. So I think the shiny object syndrome for the pure play Bitcoin treasuries, and again, I'm not throwing all of them under bus, has been May to June, July this year, where they went like, oh, we're all doing it, and pump the stock and these kind of things. The treasury companies like yours, those are the ones I think we should embrace more. You have cash on your balance sheet. You know it's worthless. You don't need it at that moment. Put it into Bitcoin aside and you build a healthy treasury there. Maybe even get paid in Bitcoin. I don't know. I think these ones will continue to grow, and they are going to be the ones who really use Bitcoin as a monetary asset. The treasury play in regards to raising money via pipe financing, debt, equity, whatever, preferred stocks, typical debt. I think it's a strategy that works if the price goes up, as we've seen, but what do you do if the price turns? Like, where do you continuously raise debt, to then buy more Bitcoin? Or are you just, how would you say, truthful enough to say, hey, we've fallen below a certain threshold. We now need to sell our Bitcoin to cover the costs. I think these are the companies that the market will decide what happens with them at the end of the day. I know there's some cool people working at all of these companies, which are like over 200 or whatever now. Yes, there will be some scammers in there, and there will be some companies to just profit off this. You unfortunately cannot control this. This happens. But I think they will just be either washed out, or bigger companies who have an advantage. Maybe, for example, MetaPlanet with the geographical advantage in Japan and the whole tax situation. Or maybe other treasuries over here in Europe or in America or South America could buy them up and say like, thanks for the cheap sats and thanks for being able to take this over. I think this is the way it plays out. So regular treasuries, they buy Bitcoin with the money they make. That's cool. The in-between play is maybe some of them will survive going up if the price rips. And if we then into a bear, they will liquidate and sell to other companies. So bigger treasury companies will evolve and you will have a few left standing. And the strategy one is just, they were the first one and the earliest one, so they will profit from the first mover's advantage. This is how I kind of look at it. But even myself, who's fully convinced that Bitcoin, like I did not invest in any treasury companies. Back in 2020, I bought some MSTR stock. I sold it, I think 2.5 years later. So I'm a pure Bitcoin play guy. I like it in self-custody. That's my way. But I obviously understand the appeal of people to invest into this simply with a speculation aspect. And yeah, I'm a big believer in, the market will wash out the good ones and the bad ones, will either be taken over or they will simply not exist.
It's almost like maybe strategy buys all the small treasury companies out at some point.
could also be, yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, this was really cool. We have one question to ask each and every one of my returning guests. And the question is, what have you learned outside of Bitcoin since your last appearance on the podcast? And with you, I think the last appearance has been, I think, at least a year already old. So like maybe 14 months or something like that.
Yeah. I think it was even longer than this. I think it was March last year. On a personal level, I've always struggled with, if I have a task given, taking my time to reassess and do the task in a timely manner. I'm always like, I need to do it now. So I've gotten a little bit better at that. And generally, following the curiosity of whatever you're interested now. Sometimes this leads to, multiple weeks figuring out live streaming, like we discussed before before hitting the record button. Or sometimes it just involves, figuring out something really cool from a history perspective and continuously chasing that. Because during my last recording, I used to then put it aside, take more time out for Bitcoin. And now I've learned no, Bitcoin is actually giving you the time and freedom to also follow other curiosities and taking your time as a whole. That would be sort of the number one thing I learned since March last year.
I love that learning. And fun enough, it comes up more and more that Bitcoin brings back time in people's life. And this actually comes more and more in that question up. So really cool. As you know, we have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you quite a technical question. He asked you, do you think PIP 360, so from Hunter Beast, is a good response to quantum computing?
I have no idea, dude. Let's just go with maybe. The whole quantum computing thing would be another super fascinating thing. I want to actually spend more time in the Bitcoin realm. Let's flip a coin. I'll go with let's say yes. If anyone sees this, please don't rip me apart in the replies. I have no idea. I haven't looked into it. I fully admit it. But it could be something where I go with yes. Maybe this is the right answer.
I'm also not sure. I had Hunter Beast actually on because I was wanting to looking into this topic since a long time. And I actually had Hunter Beast. He did not ask you the question. He was on since a longer time. But I had him on, I think a couple of weeks ago, I don't know, a month ago or something like that. And he explained everything to me. And I think I understood 20% of it. Mm-hmm. I think it's quite a complicated topic for me, quantum computing in itself. And there's a lot of, you can grasp the general thing of quantum computing, but you need also to grasp the implications of that. And I think very few people really do, because you need to understand it on a deep level to really think about all the implications. Mm-hmm. And so this is one where I have to definitely look deeper and maybe also trust a little bit that those Bitcoiners that really know that those things really deeply will make a good decision. But there's those aspects of do we break up Satoshi's coins? How do we handle all the things that come from that? Do we force everyone in an update? They're different philosophical questions to how do we handle that. And I expect a huge debate around that topic within the next 5 to 10 years when it becomes more relevant. Now, it is quite far out. Also Hunter Beast himself said, there's no worries at all in the next 5 years. There might be worries in the next 10 years. And then there might become a threat more, but it's not an immediate thing. So, I also thought when I heard that question, I was Oh shit! Like I would not know how to answer that thing. But yeah, thank you so much, Joël, for being on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find you and where can people find Relai?
Sure. So we're both most responsive on X. Just look for Relai app and you'll find us. And myself is _JKLNZ or Z, the last letter of the alphabet. And yeah, my DMs are open. If you want to chat, let me know. And yeah, mostly responsive on there.
Awesome. Really cool. Thank you so much, Joël, for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.